Getting ready to buy or sell a home? Do you want to help support pro-life organizations? Then you need Real Estate for Life. Get a top-notch real estate agent and support pro-life causes. Go to realestateforlife.org to learn more.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike? Leslie, guess what today is?
It's hump day.
Woo-hoo! Hump day!
Welcome everybody to a special edition of News from the Pew / Clown Planet extravaganza type deal. It's Holy Week, it's Spy Wednesday, and there was a lot going on, and not a lot of people going to be able to cover anything, so I wanted to get this done so that next News from the Pew isn't a 5-hour show, because they pretty much dumped a lot of stuff on us big time in the last week or two. And anyways, if you want to get more, please visit thelastAmericanVagabond.com. I got a lot of information, links-wise, from him. I used a lot that he already used. He used a lot that I already posted. So a lot of crossover in a sense, but he did 4-hour shows. I'm not doing a 4-hour show. So if you want more into things, check him out. He's got a couple of that. What this is from. I'm sorry, this is the latest link I just got done listening to the last couple of days. He did 2 in the last 3 days. Again, it's probably 3 hours. That was probably 4 hours long. Anyway, check it out. There's a lot of info. And so let's get right to it. And thankfully, I think I got the audio working on this thing. I'm not using StreamYard because it would have taken me an hour just to set this bad boy up with the videos. So I'm using the OBS unit, which the mic isn't working great on, but you can hear me at least. So anyway, again, this is going right into the topic of the day. There's going to be others. But the real ID, and starting with a different topic to start out with. But anyway, here's a good meme that I saw the other day. That hey, it's got that guy blocking it. Hey, we don't want the vaccine passport, but hey, real ID, it's MAGA style, baby. So we're going to be cool with the real ID. Let's get into DOGE real quick.
Than they do in D.C. DOGE keeps cutting government services and personnel, but the Treasury Department says it's not making much of a difference to America's bottom line. Madeline Rivera has more on why the president, though, is defending DOGE.
Elon's done a fantastic job.
The Department of Government Efficiency says it's saved American taxpayers more than $150 billion so far. But new data shows despite deep cuts to government services, DOGE hasn't made a dent in the deficit. According to the Treasury Department, spending is up more than $139 billion in the first 3 months of President Trump's new term, with the federal government borrowing $41 million more during that period than last year. Democrats are now questioning whether DOGE is adding to the deficit by making cuts that later end up being overturned by the courts.
I've never seen any of their responses contain cost-benefit analysis as they wipe out people from offices who they have to recall 2 or 3 days later.
President Trump is defending DOGE, pointing out it's finding and stopping significant fraud throughout the government, including almost $400 million in fraudulent unemployment payments over the past 5 years.
And some of it is just absurd, like people getting unemployment insurance who haven't been born yet. I mean, I think anyone can appreciate whether, I mean, come on. That's just crazy.
But even some Republicans are starting to worry that the cost cutting isn't enough, and DOGE needs to go after bigger fish.
You watch. Next year, we'll spend more money than we did this year, and the year after that, we will too.
Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says if the spending doesn't slow down, the U.S. will hit its debt ceiling by early summer. In Washington, Mallory.
And remember that that Trump, we played it on News from the Pew, just gave the Department of Defense, or the Pentagon, $1 trillion. So all those savings that DOGE has said that they did is gone right to the Pentagon.
Because he wasn't going to bring the neocons in. And I think he was irritating them at first quite a bit. So the question we're having is, are they back? Have they ever gone? Where are they? I think back to, it's actually almost 12 years ago to the date that we founded the Ron Paul Institute. Remember, we were up at the Republican Club on Capitol Hill, and I remember the press release so well because I drafted it and I was hoping I was right. It turns out I'm not right, because one of the lines that I started with is, the era of neoconservatism is over. And I think I was too optimistic, because I think we're still dealing with the neocons. They're still around.
But the one that pops in most people's mind when they talk about neocons, they think about militarism.
Yes.
And supporting of all the wars. And they've been around and in charge for a long time. And they've played a significant role in driving us into bankruptcy and perpetual wars and, all the disadvantages and the destruction of an interventionist foreign policy.
Israel to receive major new weapons shipment from the U.S. The details of the shipment are unclear, but Ynet said it would include 3,000 munitions for Israel's Air Force. Supporting Israel has definitely always been a very strong neocon position, and this administration is definitely not taking a break from the last one, which was also very supportive.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be possible for somebody to say, well, we see a sincere move and action in the Middle East to settle that war.
Yeah.
Looks like the war is guaranteed to continue until we're broke.
Yeah.
And we are getting close to that point where.
Well, here's the Somalia one, put it up here. Trump advisor Sebastian Gorka pushing for U.S. to escalate war in Somalia. It's almost like, Dr. Paul, that they're worried that Trump may solve the war in Ukraine, so they're looking for other places. Now, Gorka is definitely a neocon. He's a super uber hawk neocon, and I actually knew him in Hungary. But he wants us to start bombing heavily in Somalia. And you know why, Dr. Paul? Because, oh my gosh, Al-Qaeda is there. Al-Qaeda is there. They're bringing up this old bogeyman of Al-Qaeda is there. But the thing that's so funny, and it just shows you how the neocons are, that's the same Al-Qaeda that the neocons put into power in Syria. Al-Qaeda's running Syria, literally running Syria. The guy who's in charge, that calls himself the president, had a $10 million price on his head by the U.S. government as an Al-Qaeda terrorist. So on the one hand, they love Al-Qaeda. They want to put him in power in Syria. But when it comes time to bomb someplace like Somalia, oh my gosh, Al-Qaeda is coming. We need to bomb them. I'm going to do this next one just as a quick one before we get to the DOGE one. And this is Pete Hegseth. Talk about neocons. He's definitely a neocon. He and Rubio and Waltz, they're all neocons. They're all in the ascendance. He says he won't rule out war with Iran. Well, I don't know that it's up to him. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that was our system. But he's not ruling out war with Iran. Now, over to the one you were talking about is the DOGE, which we had huge, and we still do, huge admiration for what they're trying to do. Put that next one up. But Elon Musk did come out and say that basically the savings is not going to be $2 trillion. It's only going to be $100 billion. And I don't think that Musk should be blamed for that. I think what happened is he hit a brick wall of resistance in the government. And the neocons want nothing more than a big federal government. That's what they like. And so I think he went in there and they fought him every step of the way. Every step of the way, they fought Musk, they fought DOGE. Even Congress wouldn't get behind him. Yeah, they applauded when the lights were on, but they wouldn't pass a budget to reflect those cuts.
But their presence in the government is incestuous because they're there, and you think you have this good news on our side, exposing them, the idiocy of it all, and yet nothing real happens.
Here's Derek Bros, who blocked me on Twitter for some reason, but I know why. He can't take any kind of positive religion thing. It's only his way or the highway. Anyway, but I love his writing. He found this one. Palantir is helping DOGE with a massive IRS data project. As he says, forget abolishing the IRS. Let's work with the technocratic architects to make it more efficient. Because Trump keeps on saying we're gonna get rid of the IRS, but it hasn't happened yet. And we got the tariffs. So then we just, hey, by the way, yesterday was April 15th. Happy Fool's Day, as Peter Schiff calls it, because that's the day we all pay all the fools pay the taxes to the federal government. So you remember when the whole thing with the tariffs came down, and now all the bottom, quote unquote, bottom dropped out of Wall Street, and then it went back because all of DJT's billionaire friends told him to, hey man, stop with the tariffs so we can. This isn't good for us. Listen to this.
This is Charles Schwab. It's not just a company, it's actually an individual. And he made $2.5 billion today, and he made $900 million. He's in financials. I've always been following.
It was just a money grab. That was the whole thing. When you got the guy in charge of all things, you got your friends in there. A lot of his friends made a lot of money that day. Here's FYI, we warned you back in January, DOGE was a scam, a publicity stunt for Elon to distract public from Trump's record spending and bloated $1.2 trillion proposed military budget. Look at this disaster. And he's retweeting Shift. House Republicans just passed Trump's big, ugly budget. That's what it was called. We played it on News from the Pew last week. It raises the debt ceiling by a record amount and will produce higher spending and larger budget deficits than branded. The worst part is we're just liberated ourselves from foreign leaders. Get ready for a QE infinity. Just, again, you're not going to see the cheerleaders talk about this. We'll get into the SAVE Act, the Real ID, all this. So the SAVE Act was passed last week, and I mentioned a lot of people was asking me, how does this lead into the Real ID? Which they started talking about the week after they passed the SAVE Act. They started talking about the Real ID. This is a great There's a great interview on this. It gets into the two-party illusion in a sense. This is from back in, I think it was last year, 2024. Yeah, July 2024.
I'm Christine Ulm, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. If you plan on traveling, we need your help to prevent delays and to prove your identity. Get a Real ID. Starting May 7th, you will need a Real ID to travel by air or to visit federal buildings in the United States. These IDs keep our country safe because they help prevent fraud and they enhance security. Please do your part to protect our country. Go today and don't delay. To learn more, go to dhs.gov/real-ID. Thank you.
Everybody's probably seen that or heard that from Noam yet, the video. And it's straight from just the end of the Patriot Act and all that stuff. And you gotta go get. When I moved back to North Carolina to get my North Carolina driver's license, they asked me about I saw the Real ID thing. They said you have to have it to travel, to fly, and well, I ain't getting that. No, but you can use your passport for now. Anyway, here's the link that Catherine Austin Fitts, a SLAW report, she put together on here. And it says, yes, you can't fly without a Real ID. Okay, she wanted to put this in. Real ID is an unconstitutional federal usurpation on state rights and individual rights. May 17th, TSA is expected to begin 2 years of phased enforcement, likely no denials. The Americans can use one of the 15 other TSA accepted IDs to fly, including passports again. Yet DMVs plan to digitalize Real ID on phones with remote real-time access to it. This is just the bullet points for her underneath here. For more information, go to cchfreedom.org, National ID. Anyway, so I'm sorry, I was yawning there for a minute. In summary, it's a national ID system. Everyone in your state will be at risk of identity fraud. Jim Harper, formerly of the Cato Institute, back in 2017. The 10th, this going after the 10th Amendment. The driver's license, the Real ID, usurps the power that's been reserved to the states. Letter sent to Trump by 116 Pennsylvania legislators back in 2017. This really is a national identification card for the United States of America. For the first time in our history, we've never done this before. We shouldn't be doing it without a full debate. I'm very reluctant for this country to have a national ID card. U.S. Senator Lamar Alexander during the 2005 Real ID debate on the floor of the U.S. Senate. The official purpose includes, but is not limited to accessing federal facilities, boarding federally regulated commercial aircraft, entering nuclear power plants, and other purposes that the Secretary can determine. Real ID Act 2005. Statements from the 2025 Real ID Rule. You can use other forms of passport. You can use for other things up to 2 years. There is non-enforcement for 2 years. Can't use a passport, facing the decreased backlash. Delays, mitigates, 2-year flexibility, warning notice. Here's just official language from it, from the TSA Final Rule 2025. For more information, go to refuserealid.org. If you click on that, just goes into the national ID dash ID thing that we just talked about. Has that same thing. Go in the state and personal sovereignty, public statements, fully imposed. It will be digitalized, potentially put on your phone, made real-time and remote accessible, and used to track and control movement, purchases, and transactions. Yes, Real ID could become a Chinese-like social credit system linked to a global ID. Expanding use of biometric and digital ID systems are potential threats of medical privacy, patient autonomy, and individual freedom. Real ID opens the door to tracking, profiling, and control over your medical choices in daily life. That should go without any thought. So you can still fly without it. So it just goes into a little history of it. National ID card. Well, half the states refuses usurpation of states' rights. 25 states pass laws prohibiting compliance, and 12 states pass resolutions opposing Real ID. Okay, we'll move on. Let's see. Yeah, there's a push to digitalize these through the states. Don't fall for this, because it says Edward Dowd has, if you have a passport, you have no problem, but this is just a ridiculous imposition of those who don't have one. And hey, maybe start with just having an ID to vote, because the whole thing about it is just to keep from, hey, we don't want illegals voting. We don't want voter fraud, which is going to happen whether you like it or not. So they have to do this. They push this thing through, and again, they're trying to digitalize the passports and everything else. I have more on that here in a second. See, people think this is perfectly innocent. The Real ID, the government makes sure that I'm not an illegal immigrant, and each piece looks innocent until you see them snap together when you start to realize, oh, we have a digital concentration camp. Former Assistant Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, investment banker and founder of the Celebrity Report, Catherine Austin Fitts, describes with Shannon Joy how the control grid is being snapped into place with pieces including controllable digital currencies, CBDC, and the Real ID, recently highlighted by the Trump administration as a forthcoming necessity for air travel.
It's hard for many people to see the control grid snapping into place, is you have all these different sections. And while they're not integrated together, as they grow and when they integrate together so that you can control your transactions and you can control your resource use. So I can stop your car from driving. I can turn your utilities off. I can shut off your money. I can stop you from transacting. That kind of control requires an infrastructure of data centers, and really AI is the final bullet that really brings it all together in what I call the digital concentration camp. So most people are thinking this is perfectly innocent. What's wrong with a Real ID? I can see why the government needs to make sure I'm not an illegal immigrant, and so each piece looks innocent. And it's until you see them snap together that you start to realize, oh, we have a problem. And if you look at all the different things, so let's just walk through some of the things.
Sure.
Okay, so let's start with money, because ultimately my concern is that this is going to end your financial freedom.
Okay.
Because we're going to use technology to basically shut down the Constitution. So you can have a constitutional convention and revoke the Constitution, or you can use just technology to basically supersede and oversee it. So in the financial area, one of the things the president has done is he has come out and announced no CBDCs in executive order, but we are going to move forward with stable coins. And stable coins will, so it's interesting. If you look at the New York Fed, a CBDC would be done by the Federal Reserve, presumably the New York Fed and the Fed member banks. If you look at the banks that own the New York Fed and the Fed, instead they're going to create subsidiaries and they're going to do programmable money through their private subsidiaries. So this is how the Fed gets around the disclosure requirements and other obligations that they have to Congress. So it's sort of like meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
Right.
So the banks that own and control the Fed are going to do it directly without going through the Fed. They can switch.
The redheaded libertarian, I'm concerned about the central government mandating real ID to go between states as it violates both Article 4 and the 10th Amendment while exploiting the Commerce Clause. States decide real ID as states decide abortion. The efforts to silence this as anti-Semitism is category retarded. Because right now you're hearing labels of if you don't agree with this, you're anti-Semitic. Bill to digitalize all birth and death certificates in the country gets Parliament nod. So this is in the United Kingdom. Under the new bill, that center looks to create a national state-level database of registered birth and deaths, which would help an efficient and transparent delivery of public services and social benefits. Let's see, this was back in 2023. Here is S884, Improving Digital Identity Act of 2023. Remember, this is all the WEF stuff coming right into you. It's just what we didn't say what everyone said they were against beforehand, now they're for. There's Greg Reese. Real ID is the same digital AI system we were told to reject from the WEF. I forgot about this one. Kind of funny, it was on here. This is exactly why they waited for Trump to enforce the Real ID deadline. His supporters will not only eagerly support it, but actively justify and defend it. Just look. We've been saying this Rick and I have been saying this for how many months now? Then it tells me people are too busy whining over stupid you know what and need to just get their planking FID. Yeah, keep blaming Trump, but never the Congress or Senate or anyone in the cabinet. Trump is the one purposely withholding all of that. Never anyone else's fault but Trump. 99% of people are have it, and May 2025 is the final deadline for it. It cannot be delayed any longer. It's been in place for your guys. All this stuff. Real ID was passed 20 years ago. There's no way that you didn't know before. Useful idiots out there. Real ID is just your driver's license, silly. What's wrong with you? You will only need Real ID to fly. Real ID will be used for voter ID. Meanwhile, the United Nations is literally rolling out a journey path, which will fully utilize full biometrics by way of scrapping all physical boarding passes, and this will be rolled out to all airports across the world over the next 3 years, and mandatory compliance will be required if you want to fly. This will lead to a digital ID in the coming social credit system, like the ones in communist China. Yeah, that is exactly where it leads. The technocratic NWO, New World Order police state nightmare hell on earth. It is absolutely not a coincidence that DHS is making it mandatory to have Real ID to start flying May 7th, because this journey pass is directly tied and connected with the United Nations WEF World Economic Forum plan. UN Agenda 2030 moves on at lightning pace. The vast majority of people are not ready for what is coming. This is a link from The Guardian. Boarding passes and check-in could be scrapped, and air travel shake-up. Facial rec and a journey pass stored on passenger photos are part of UN-backed plans to digitalize air transport. Here's Jason Baxter. For all the Trump supporters mindlessly justifying this, read this excellent article by Derek Rose, and it's at this is at the Free Thought Project. This is back in April 2nd, 2025, via Last American Vagabond. On March 25th, Trump signed an EO titled Preserving and Protecting the Integrity of American Elections. This EO is aimed at securing U.S. elections after years of claims of widespread voter fraud and illegal voting. While there does exist some element of truth to these claims, they are being exploited to push the United States ever closer to requiring digital IDs not only for voting, but for daily life. The EO states that the U.S. fails to enforce basic and necessary election protections employed by modern developing nations. It highlights how nations like India and Brazil are tying voter identification to a biometric database. Remember how Klaus Schwab used to talk about biometric fusion or biometric to human identity. Although the EO does not explicitly mention the U.S. operating a similar biometric database, this is absolutely the long-term plan. The EO outlines what qualifies as documentary proof of U.S. citizenship, including the identification document which is compliant with the requirements of the Real ID Act of 2005 that indicates the applicant is a citizen of the United States. The Real ID Act was first passed in 2005 at the recommendation of the fraudulent 9/11 Commission in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. Many U.S. states have resisted implementing the Real ID measures for the last 20 years. However, the years of avoiding compliance with the Real ID Act are now coming to an end on May 7, 2025. In January, 1 week before Trump returned to the White House, the TSA published the final rule for enforcement of Real ID compliance and identification cards. Beginning on May 7th, Americans attempting to board commercial flights or enter federal buildings will need to display state-issued driver's license and identification cards that meet the security requirements established by the Real ID Act. I can guarantee I'm never walking into a federal building, and I may never be on another flight. Congress passed the Real ID Act in 2005 to enhance security standards for identification directly in response to the security vulnerabilities highlighted by the 9/11 attacks. Former TSA Administrator David Pekoske said at the time, identity verification is foundational to security, always. One form of Real ID compliant identification, which will become increasingly popular, is known as the Mobile Driver's License, MDL, or simply digital driver's licenses. Real ID, Mobile Driver's License, and Digital ID. Mobile driver's license are digital identification stored on a smartphone, which typically include the same information as physical driver's license and identification cards. At the moment, not all MDLs are compliant with the requirements of the Real ID Act, but the TSA is granting a waiver to certain states to allow residents to use MDLs. Those digital IDs are beginning to roll out across North America in 3 common forms, including proprietary apps owned by the local, state, and national government, various state-approved apps like Smart ID, and the Apple Wallet. According to the Guide to Digital Driver's License, users will open the chosen app, scan the front and back of their physical driver's license, and then verify their identity with a selfie or similar biometric ID. You have to do that to pay at the IRS right now on their website. Similar, very similar was already being starting on Twitter. I haven't seen that on Twitter. Once verified, the user can begin using their digital ID app as they would a physical ID card. Government Tech recently reported at least 5 million Americans have signed up for MDLs in 11 states that have interoperable programs fully implemented. Sorry for my English-speaking people, I messed that up. GovTech determined these figures through public record requests. They also note that at least a dozen other states, including California, are already conducting pilots or will soon be launching their own MDL programs. I remember that. GovTech also notes that states like Iowa, Colorado, and Utah have partnerships with business and government agencies to accept their mobile IDs. Interestingly, the businesses which have the highest rate of adoption are those which serve or sell products like liquor and cannabis. Other businesses accepting the MDLs include credit unions, security firms, real estate companies, auto body shops, and healthcare organizations. In May of 2021, the ACLU discussed efforts to mandate digital driver's license. In the report titled Identity Crisis, the ACLU warned that the use of digital driver's licenses, quote, raises the danger there will be no balanced assessment of the costs and benefits of such a system, and that we will adopt systems that do not strike the right balance between the needs for identification, security, and convenience and Americans' well-funded diversion of government and corporate surveillance and regimentation. Jay Stanley, senior policy analyst with the ACLU Speech, Privacy, and Technology Project, said the switch to digital IDs would have, quote, big implications, big implications for American life. Quote, if not done just right, digital driver's license could be disastrous for privacy, increase inequity, and lead to persuasive ID checks in American life, including the internet. Yes. June 2020, the Center for Human Rights and Global Justice, quote, hub for human rights study at New York University School of Law issued a 100-page report detailing the growing dangers of a reliance on digital identity around the world. The report, titled Paving a Digital Road to Hell, examined the role of World Bank and other international networks which had been promoting the use of digital ID in recent years. The report points a finger at the World Bank and the aforementioned ID4D initiative, but also notes the program was started with the catalytic investment from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Omidyar Network, and various other governments.
TSA now accepts digital ID, the more convenient and secure way to prove your identity when traveling. It's already in several states and counting, so you can use approved digital IDs at select TSA security checkpoints, including TSA pre-check lanes, simply by scanning your QR code or tapping your phone. Your photo is taken and compared to your picture on your ID, and you're off to security screening. Simple as that. Now, you still need to carry a physical ID and present it if asked. But if you'd like to stay a step ahead with a smart idea that's at your fingertips, use an approved digital ID at TSA.
And if you want to read it, I'll put all this in the show notes. Digital IDs must be resisted. I would love for everyone to resist it, but I saw how many people put face nappies on or face muzzles on during the scamdemic. And even those that talked a big game online and tweeted about it, oh, I'm not going to do it, or yelled at people for calling them names in videos and shows and things like that, those guys put muzzles on. I know because some of them text me up with photos of them with muzzles on. So they got in a museum, airport, they flew, whatever. And they always had an excuse about, oh, we had to fly or something. No, you didn't. Could have drove. Didn't have to go to the museum. Now, how many places I went that they told me how to put it on? None. I mean, when I did at the hospital, when we had a kid, I had 16 muzzle masks on my face to make fun of them. And I had the cops come to the door because I didn't have them on one time. And I called out the cop who didn't have it on for coming to the door. So pretty much what I'm saying is people might have to go to spine. So it is, in my previous reporting, I've outlawed how the push for digital ID programs is a scam disguised as a human right. This scam is designed to lull the world into accepting digital identity schemes as beneficial, convenient, safe, and necessary for the world of the future. UN and WEF both promote the use of digital identities using blockchain tech and biometric data gained by scanning the faces or retinas of individuals. World Bank is also funding biometric ID programs in Mexico, pushing digital ID in poorer countries with an unsustainable goal of providing legal identity to the 1.1 billion people who do not currently have one. The goal is to get the world on digital IDs by 2030 as part of the UN Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda. The SDGs are a collection of 17 interlinked objectives adopted by the UN in 2015 with the sustainable goal of ending poverty, protecting the planet, and spreading peace and prosperity to all people by 2030. However, privacy advocates and digital rights groups have warned about the dangers of digital ID programs. See, during the Rona-19 scamdemic, many nations implemented vaccine passports as a means for travel and work. These programs were essentially the equivalent of digital ID. Although many people believe Kamala Harris' presidency would have all but guaranteed the expansion of dangerous programs like digital IDs. I warned before the election that no matter who is president, the infrastructure was already in place and these schemes would expand. We said the same thing. With Donald Trump promising to secure elections by aligning with the goals of the Real ID Act of 2005, we are ensured to see increase of calls for making digital IDs mandatory. To make matters worse, Trump's calls for biometric entry-exit systems, I'll play that because I've been playing that for a while, as a solution for fighting illegal immigration makes it clear that some version of digital IDs backed by facial rec will soon be a norm in the United States. You've recognized this if you watched any of our news shows.
Number 8, we will finally complete the biometric entry-exit visa tracking system, which we need desperately. For years, Congress has required biometric entry-exit visa tracking systems, but it has never been completed. The politicians are all talk, no action, never happens, never happens. Hillary Clinton, all talk. Unfortunately, when there is action, it's always the wrong decision. Do you ever notice? In my administration, we will ensure that this system is in place. And I will tell you, it will be on land, it will be on sea, it will be in air. We will have a proper tracking system. Number 8.
Unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the rule. I rise also in support of the Sessions Amendment, but I also would like to take this time to make a few comments about why I will be voting against the bill. With the utmost sincerity and the deep conviction, I am quite confident that this bill, if you vote for it, you will be voting for a national ID card. And I know some will argue against that, and they say this is voluntary, but it really can't be voluntary. If a state opts out, nobody's going to accept their driver's license. So this is not voluntary. Matter of fact, even the House Republican Conference, who sent a statement around and some points about this bill, said the federal government should set standards for the issuance of birth certificates and sources of identification such as driver's licenses. This is nationalization of all identification. It will be the introduction of the notion that we will be carrying our papers. Matter of fact, I think it might even be a little bit worse than just carrying our papers and showing our papers, because in this bill there are no limitations of the information that may be placed on this identification card. There are minimum standards but no maximum limitations, and the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security can add anything it wants. So if they would like to put on there the fact that you belong to a pro-gun group, it may well appear on your national ID card, because there may be an administration someday that might like to have that information. But there's no limitations as far as biometrics. There's no limitations as far as radio frequency identification. That technology is already available, being used on our passports, which means that you don't have to show your papers. All you have to do is walk by somebody that has a radio frequency ability to read your passport or read your driver's license. And there's no limitation as to what they can put on these documents. And this bill also allows the definition of terrorism to be redefined. There is no limitations. And you know, in many ways, I understand how well-intentioned this is, but to me it's sort of like the gun issue. Conservatives always know that you don't register guns. That is just terrible, because the criminals won't register their guns. But what are we doing with this bill? We're registering all the American people. And you want to register the criminals and the thugs and the terrorists. Well, you know, why does a terrorist need a driver's license? They can just steal a car or steal an airplane or steal a bus or whatever they want to do. So you're registering all the American people because you're looking for a terrorist, and all the terrorists are going to do is avoid the law. But we, the American people, have to obey the law. If we don't, we go to prison. So I rise in strong objection to this bill, and I hope that there will be a few that will oppose H.R. 418. Thank you.
That was back in 2005. Combining this with digital ID, real ID, and the Peter Thiel Ellison-backed AI surveillance infrastructure and his blueprint for militarized techno-fascism, biometric entry, AI enforcement checkpoints, and U.S. troops deployed on domestic soil. This is not freedom. Here's Trump authorizes U.S. military to take control at U.S.-Mexico border. By the way, if you were wondering what he was talking about with the Ellison, remember that happened on day one or day two, whichever you were. The first full day of the Trump administration was the Ellison, the $500 billion that went to the cancer vaccines. Remember that one? Day one.
Secretary Kristi Noem is turning into a real disappointment because this is one of a number of things that she's done that really kind of back up what you warned back when they created the department. It's going to be limiting our liberties, not anyone else's. We'll put on this first clip. This is from Newsmax, and they recognize. So Kristi Noem came out on Friday afternoon, and she said, "I got news for everyone. We are going to start enforcing Real ID, I think, as of May 1st. So Newsmax came out today. Real ID announcement receives wave of pushback on X, and which is good. And you go to the next one. Here's what Noem did Friday evening. Now that's when they always do something they don't want to have any people noticing it. She announced a digital ID known as Real ID, which requires a high-resolution digital facial image, would be required by May 7th to fly. Starting May 7, you will need a real ID to travel by air or to visit federal buildings in the U.S., she said in a video on X. These IDs keep our country safe because they help prevent fraud and they enhance security. And as soon as she said that, a backlash ensued on X, including Dr. Paul, by our great friend Thomas Massey. Go to the next one. Massey hit it right on the head. He called BS on Kristi Noem. He said, Real ID isn't needed, and it won't stop terrorists from hijacking planes. Most of the 9/11 hijackers held Saudi, UAE, Egyptian, or Lebanese passports. Real ID is a national standard and database of IDs that is primarily a tool for control of Americans. Trump shouldn't enforce it, he said. 2005, President George W. Bush, now here's the kicker, you remember this, Dr. Paul, signed the Real ID Act into law. It was authored by Representative James Sensenbrenner, the same author of the Patriot.
See, this is one reason I'm doing this. I just saw somebody that has a big Catholic platform go, this Real ID thing is a royal pain in the back end. I'm not looking forward to wasting any day in the DMV getting one. These people have no freaking clue. These are the same guy that wrote it. Good dude. I like him. But he's also one of the things that the Trump is sent from God, and he's a first-class miracle. And all this, I mean, just insane. They can't say anything negative about the administration. They haven't said anything about the ethnic cleansing going on. And now saying it's just a real pain in the neck. Do you think this is a real pain in the neck, what you're hearing?
Act. You remember those times. Sensenbrenner was going nuts writing all these bills.
Yes, and they portrayed him as a great civil libertarian and working for our privacy. That's the most insulting thing is what Noem said. It was issued to make us safe.
Yeah.
They always turn it and twist it around. It's sort of like, we need the Federal Reserve so nobody ever counterfeits money.
Yeah.
We want the monopoly.
Exactly.
This is what this is, monopoly over control. I'm not very happy with the direction we're going right now. It looks like we're going to lose a lot more privacy if this bill gets reopened and made much worse. And it looks like it can do a lot more damage yet to come.
Yeah, it's been sitting around. It passed in 2005, and it's just been sitting around. No one's done anything to it. No one has really enforced it. Now, all of a sudden, Kristi Noem wakes up and says, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and enforce this, And so let's go to a little bit more from the Newsmax article. Now, the criticism is not coming from the left, it doesn't seem primarily. Thankfully, it's a lot on the right. Thankfully, someone is carrying the banner that you carried 20 years ago, and that someone is Thomas Massey. Now, he came out with a bunch of posts on X when Kristi Noem made her dumb announcement. And I've just picked out a couple of the better ones. Now, people will find this radical, but think about it. He says, as long as a pilot's door is locked and no one has weapons, why do you care that someone who flies has government permission? Real ID provides no benefit, yet presents a serious risk to freedom. If a person can't be trusted to fly without weapons, why are they roaming free? Very good point. And here's another one where he explains it to people who don't get it. They don't understand what Real ID is. He says, Real ID isn't a database. It's proof that your physical person matches an entry in the digital database. Its power and purpose will be realized when everyone complies, but not before. This is responsive to the I didn't give them much information, I've had one for years, why worry argument he makes. So it's not essentially a database in itself. It is the relationship between that card that you hold and the database that exists already. And they can add to it. Remember we talked about they can add anything they want. Vax records, gun records, civil liberties, First Amendment records, anything can be added to it.
Back to the Trump authorizes U.S. military to take control of land at U.S.-Mexico border. That's just imagine Brandon or Kamala. Imagine cackles saying, oh, yeah, we're going to take over land. Can you imagine the outcry? By the way, could you imagine the outcry of Brandon say, hey, we're going to make everyone on the digital ID? These people would have lost their flipping minds. But no, now you don't even, Jack Paso and all those Gunner and all those guys, they haven't said a thing about the digital ID. Police in the United Kingdom are making about 12,000 arrests a year for posts on social media that cause offense. There are more than 30 arrests per day for speech crime. Just think about when that comes here with the EO, with the anti-Semitism EO. That's when they run out, and I got more video on that coming out at the end of this. When they run out of those guys, they're going to come after us. Trump, this Alex Jones, used to be good Alex Jones. Alex Jones, President Trump just authorized the DOD to militarize the Roosevelt Reservation along the U.S. border of California, Arizona, and New Mexico. This triggers a 60-foot buffer zone on a 700-mile stretch of our border. Will now be considered military property, and troops can seize illegals to hand of border patrol. Translation: it just activated the military, completely shut down the invasion on the southern U.S. border. Consider military property, 700-mile stretch on border. So now it's not property of California, Arizona, and New Mexico. It's now U.S. federal property. Remember the BLM? You had problems with that about 4 or 5 years ago. They were coming on a property and just taking it over and shooting it. By the way, here's the 100-mile border zone. This is from the ACLU. The Fourth Amendment U.S. Constitution protects people from random and arbitrary stops and searches. Although the federal government claims the power to conduct certain kinds of warrantless stops within 100 miles of the U.S. border, important Fourth Amendment protections still apply. This helps you understand the rights within a 100-mile border zone. This is literally what that is. Here's it over there on the left. 2 out of 3 people live within the 100-mile border zone. So you see, when anything in red, the feds could say, they apparently say they could stop you without a warrant, search and seize you. I mean, the entire state of Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, definitely, all of Jersey, most of Maryland, half of the Carolinas, all of Florida, half of Louisiana. I mean, look at this. Half of California, half of Oregon and Washington. Insanity. Most of Wisconsin, all of Michigan, the northern part of Ohio, almost all of New York, just a little smidgen of New York right there. They can literally they claim they can do all that. What is a reasonable distance? Federal government defines a reasonable distance as 100 air miles from any external boundary of the United States. So, combining the federal regulation and the federal law regarding warrantless vehicle searches, CBP claims authority to board a bus or train without a warrant anywhere within this 100-mile zone. Two-thirds of the U.S. population, or about 200 million people, reside within this expanded border region, according to the 2010 census. Most of the 10 largest cities in the states, including New York City, L.A., and Chicago, fall in this region. Some states like Florida lie entirely in this region. Literally, if that's not a violation of Fourth Amendment, tell me what is. See, Tim Pool, thank God Trump's FDA is fast-tracking the bird flu mRNA jab. This will build confidence among Trump supporters and that the FDA is listening. Woohoo! As Madcraft said, meanwhile, the MAGA Zionist shield Tim Pool quotes, thank God Trump's FDA is fast-tracking the my bird flu mRNA vaccine. Trust the plan, guys. Operation Warp Speed 2.0. Here's the link. This came out 2 days ago. My mouth dropped. Like, so what is going on with Maha? Hope anyone knows what self-amplifying means. Literally. Here's the link. Let's read a little bit. Star mRNA vaccine candidate ARC-2304 granted fast-track designation for the self-amplifying mRNA jab candidate. That's why I'm doing Count Planet. And you saw this in local news the other day. Common tick in the Carolinas can cause red meat allergy. Remember, we talked about this for the last couple of years. Single bite from the Lone Star tick can trigger severe allergy to red meat or pork, as doctors told our partners at WBT-TV.
One little ticks become active, right? Well, one type poses a threat that you may never have heard before.
Yeah, it can mess up your food. A single bite from the Lone Star tick can trigger a severe allergy to red meat or pork, and doctors say it can be life-changing.
It's amazing how your life can change from one little bite.
Jim Dickerson thinks that one little bite was from a tick and that it happened during a vacation to Florida. Back home, he passed out while doing yard work.
My face went numb completely, and I went into and looked in the mirror, and it was so contorted, I thought I was having a stroke.
Doctors diagnosed him with alpha-gal syndrome, which is caused by a bite from the Lone Star tick. Patients develop a delayed allergic reaction to red meat. Eating beef, pork, or lamb can cause severe hives, difficulty breathing, and a severe drop in blood pressure.
Worst pain I've ever experienced.
Dr. Ted Lee is an allergist and has treated dozens of alpha-gal patients. He says transmission involves a tick that is fed on a mammal like a deer or cow.
Brings those chemicals, those antigens from that mammal into the human.
Jim no longer eats red meat. He does eat a lot of chicken. Turkey, fish, and plant-based meat alternatives are also safe. But dangers can hide in seasonings or side dishes, something Jim learned the hard way.
One of the dishes that I ate was probably cooked and seasoned with maybe a ham hock or a piece of pork, piece of beef, and just that was enough to trigger that.
There is no cure for alpha-gal, so preventing tick bites is key. The Lone Star tick is common in both North and South Carolina. It has a noticeable white spot or Lone Star on its back.
But you need to be careful. Use sprays, whatever, and avoid really staying in the woods.
Lone Star ticks are most active April through June. So if you're hiking, camping, really doing anything.
And you remember they created that thing just so that the people would stop eating meat. There's on the Khalil thing. If a legal permanent resident can be deported without breaking any laws because the government doesn't like his policy, it's not a free country. It's that simple. Ryan Grimm, Mahood Khalil addressed the immigration court saying, quote, I would like to quote what you said last time, that there's nothing more important to this court than due process rights and fundamental fairness. Clearly, what we witnessed today, neither of these two principles were present today or in this whole process. This is exactly why the Trump administration has sent me to this court 1,000 miles away from my family. I just hope that the urgency that you have deemed fit for me are afforded to the hundreds of others who have been here without hearing for months. Daniel McAdams, you've seen he's on the Ron Paul show. This is retweeting the Kristi Noem thing. Khalil hates the United States and what we stand for, so his removal should come as welcome news. Yeah, he hates hot dogs and baseball. No, he hates this administration's Middle East policy, which all of us all like to do. there is a difference, and conservatives used to understand that. Now they've gone full Stalin. Now they've gone full Stalin, arresting and jailing anyone who does not support their foreign policy. You can see where this is heading. Not just Stalin. You can see this. They're going full Lincoln. Lincoln did that junk. Speaking of that, let me pull that up beforehand. Who did that? I have it here. Excuse me, just pardon. There it is. No, is it? No, that wasn't it, but it was someone else had that. This one's stupid. I thought that was it. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe that was it. No, I don't think it was. Oh, I know where it was. Brian. Here it is, right here. Yep. Jefferson Davis account. But I don't give a darn whether they're guilty or innocent. I saved Maryland by similar arrests, and so I mean the whole Kentucky. William Seward, Secretary of State, October 1861. Let's see. There has been so much talk about the sacred rights of personal liberty, but I think that if any error has been committed, it has been in sending too few instead of too many to Fort Lafayette. Governor Morton, Republican of Indiana, April 11th, 1863. And don't forget, the former the birthplace of the Star Spangled Banner. They arrested the Lincoln administration in prison. Francis Scott Key's grandson at the same place he was. As Aaron says, what an absolute joke. Everyone here is pretending. For Kelly is pretending that he's incapable of releasing someone his own jail is holding at U.S. expense, and Trump is pretending he can't ask him to release the guy. And meanwhile, Mr. Abrego rots in prison. He may be dead. I bet he's either dead or he's beat up beyond recognition.
Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's always
how can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
So you can release him inside El Salvador?
Yeah, but I'm not releasing. We're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. We just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into
our country. There's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people.
So notice the end, he points at the media. He was questioning, hey, why don't you admitted that the guy is in prison unjustly and wrongly? Can you just get him back? And and Trump calls the people asking the questions sick people.
Yeah, they're sick. These are sick people.
Clown.
Open to deporting individuals that aren't foreign aliens but are criminals to El Salvador. Does that include potentially U.S. citizens, fully naturalized Americans?
If they're criminals and if they hit people with baseball bats over their head that happen to be 90 years old, and if
that's a state issue, by the way, that has nothing to do with the federal government.
If they rape 87-year-old women in Coney Island, Brooklyn.
That's on New York and Brooklyn.
Yeah, that includes them. What do you think? There's special category of person? They're as bad as anybody.
Special category person? You mean like a U.S. citizen?
That comes in. We have bad ones too, and I'm all for it because we can do things with the president for less money and have great security.
By the way, the guy who's sitting right to his right calls himself the cool dictator.
And we have a huge prison population. We have a huge number of prisons, and then we have the private prisons, and some are operated well, I guess, and some aren't. But he does a great job with that. We have others that we're negotiating with too. But no, if it's a homegrown criminal, I have no problem. Now, we're studying the laws right now. Pam is studying. If we can do that, that's good. And I'm talking about violent people. I'm talking about really bad people. Really bad people. Every bit as bad as the ones coming in. And I made the statement when I heard about this a long time ago now, 4 years ago. When I heard that this guy was having open borders, I said every single criminal from all over the world.
Again, he has no authority to do that. And it's just, you talk about danger. Let me grab something. I forgot about it while he was talking. I forgot about bringing this up because he's inconsistent as well. Where is it? Bear with me. It's Brandon. And don't forget those, not that. Oh, yeah, here it is, right here.
So they can lay on it as well.
And we're going to work with people so that if they go out in a nice way and go back to their country, we're going to work with them right from the beginning on trying to get them back in legally. Is that right? So it gives you a real incentive. Otherwise, they never come back. They'll never be allowed once a certain period of time goes by, which is probably going to be 60 days. We're also going to work with farmers that if they have strong recommendations for their farms for certain people, we're going to let them stay in for a while and work with the farmers and then come back and go through a process, a legal process. But we have to take care of our farmers and hotels and various places where where they need the people. And we're going to be working with you very carefully on that. So a farmer will come in with a letter concerning certain people saying they're great, they're working hard. We're going to slow it down a little bit for them. And then we're going to ultimately bring them back. They'll go out, they're going to come back as legal workers. Okay?
So what is it? Is it all illegals or it's just some illegals? As he says, only critics of Israel get deported.
Immigrants out of the shadows, give them the conditions that we expect them to meet, paying a fine for coming here illegally, trying to pay back taxes over time, and learning English. If they had committed a crime in our country or the country they came from, then they should be deported. But for everyone else, there must be a path to legalization. I would introduce that in the first 100 days of my...
They're all on the same team.
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He
Wrong.
had been illegally in our country.
Wrong.
And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13
Wrong.
and he was illegally
Pam is lying through. By the way, I didn't know she had an actor's account.
in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it.
They didn't say that.
Meaning,
And by the way, there was a 9-0 Supreme Court ruling that they have to have due process, but these guys are ignoring it.
provide a plane. So will you return him?
And you are doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
But Stephen Miller, wait a minute. Can you just also respond to that question? Because, it's asked by CNN, and they always ask it with a slant, because they're totally slanted, because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned...
And it goes, it's sickening to listen to these bums.
I think that when people are chanting death to Israel, they forget that they realize the second part of that chant is death to America. And from the river to the sea, Palestine shall be free. They don't even begin to know the history. There never was a Palestine.
Speaking of not knowing history,
You get it because that's the latest appointment that Trump did. Massive Zionist. Yehuda Kaplan as a special envoy to censor the free speech against Israel under the you-know-what of anti-Semitism. Here's Trump's tweet. I am proud to nominate Yehuda Kaplan as the U.S. Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism ambassador at large. Yehuda is a successful businessman, a staunch advocate for Jewish faith and the rights of the people to live and worship free from persecution. With anti-Semitism dangerously on the rise, Yehuda will be the strongest representative of Americans and Jews across the globe and promote peace. Thanks, Yehuda. Your U.S. government, federal government is ran by Israel. the ICE director envisions Amazon-like mass deportation system, quote, prime with human beings. Is there a video of this one? I could have sworn there was. No, it's just photos of everything. Leader of ICE said that his dream for the agency is squads of trucks rounding up immigrants for deportation the same way the Amazon trucks crisscross American cities delivering packages. Quote, we need to get better at treating this like a business, like Amazon Prime, but with human beings. This is freaking nuts.
It's just so interesting, too. You know, there's this America First movement, which means like we prioritize our own country, not foreign countries, not foreign leaders, not foreigners. And this is Bukele mocking American justice and the American judiciary, as he's done before. Remember when the court originally imposed an injunction on Venezuelans, 238 of them being sent to an El Salvadoran prison, at least some of whom were clearly or almost certainly innocent, even though we've had no evidence, no trial. You can't say that for certain. That's the problem with no evidence, no trial. The government just says so. And they basically ignored the court order. The court order was issued orally. They put them on the plane anyway. That was when Judge Boasberg ordered the airplane to turn around because it violated his order. And then Bukele went on Twitter, on X, and in response to an article saying they shipped them to El Salvador anyway, despite a court order, he said, oopsie, too late, with a laughing emoji, laughing our judiciary. And a lot of America First people, a lot of MAGA people cheered, oh, that a foreign leader is mocking our court system, our constitutional order. We're so happy about that. This just doesn't seem very America First to me. Quite the opposite. Like we're now trying to emulate a Central American tyranny. That's how you make America great again, by making it more like El Salvador. Here's the New York Post on March 17th that makes clear that for every prisoner the United States is sending to El Salvador, the United States is paying them $6 million to jail hundreds of Venezuelan gang suspects. Works out to $25,000 per detainee, a 43% discount on on average U.S. prison costs. I mean, does that sound acceptable to you? We have American prisons. We have a whole system of laws governing how our prisons operate for our citizens. They have rights established by decades of courts, and now we can just send them to an El Salvadoran prison where all these rights are disregarded explicitly and are considered jokes. And obviously the fact that we're paying these people to be there means, of course, we can get back anybody we want. El Salvador is one of the most aggressive and severe human rights abusers, certainly in the hemisphere, if not in the world. Here's what the U.S. State Department last year said as part of its 2023 human rights report that it issues about every country. It says, they did decrease violence. Everybody understands that. But arbitrary arrests and mass pretrial hearings undermined due process and exacerbated historically difficult conditions in overcrowded prisons. There were reports that the government or its agents committed arbitrary or unlawful killings, largely stemmed from deaths of detainees while in prison, either from medical neglect or physical abuse. The human rights non-governmental organization, Socorro Judiciario Humanitariano, which is basically aiding humanitarian justice, recorded the deaths of 79 detainees as of August 16th and determined that 33 of the deaths were violent. The human rights organization Cristosal confirmed 71 deaths of detainees and determined that 13 of the deaths showed signs of violence, including beatings by a club or baton. In March, the Newspaper El País interviewed several released detainees, one of whom stated prison guards beat his cellmate to death. Socorro Juridico Humanitariano reported that 21 detainees died from a lack of medical attention. There were reports that security and law enforcement officials arrested prisoners and did not inform their family of their whereabouts, and on and on. I mean, these prisons have been deemed human rights abuses all throughout the world. In October last year, the Committee to Protect Journalists issued a report on the crackdown on press freedoms and freedom of speech, that journalists have been harassed and criminalized for criticizing the government. All the things that I understood the American right was opposed to, at least, under Biden. Censorship and criminalizing dissent and attacking the government. I don't think these are things we want to emulate. I don't think these are things we want to admire. Amnesty International issued a report in December last year that basically Bukele is ruling by a state of emergency that he claims gives him the right basically to eliminate all rights and liberties. And then Human Rights Watch also issued a report on El Salvador in January of this year, saying under the state of emergency, police and soldiers have conducted hundreds of indiscriminate raids, particularly in low-income neighborhoods, arresting over 81,000 people. And score how incontrovertible this is, how uncontroversial within the judiciary it is, not among left-wing judges, not among establishment judges, but even among the judges who are most beloved by the American right. Just 2 weeks ago, the Supreme Court, by a 9-0 ruling, said that you cannot deport Venezuelans or other people under the Alien Enemies Act, which gives the president a lot of power if he declares war to remove people. Even with those extreme powers, said the 9 justices unanimously on the Supreme Court, they have to be given notice and a hearing and judicial review of whether or not the accusations against them are in fact valid. This is all 9 justices of the Supreme Court. Remember, these are people in the country illegally, and that is still what Clarence Thomas and Justice Alito and Justice Gorsuch and everyone else on the court, Brett Kavanaugh, John Roberts, Amy Coney Barrett, and the 3 liberal justices, all of them agreed on that. Here is the court decision. The case is titled Donald Trump versus JGG, which is one of the Venezuelan foreign nationals illegally in the United States that they were planning to not go through deportation, but to send to El Salvador prison based on the invocation of the American Enemies Act. The court split on where they can bring the case, but the court agreed unanimously that they have the right to be heard before they're deported under the Alien Enemies Act. Again, not deported in the sense that if the government proves they're here illegally, they just go back to their home country. If the government wants to remove them under the AEA and send them to a different country where they're going to be imprisoned, they have to have a hearing, said the Supreme Court in this case unanimously. Here's what the court agreed to. Again, they did vacate the injunction issued by Judge Boasberg because they said it shouldn't have been brought in Washington. The majority said by a 5-4 ruling, it has to be brought in the place where the detainees physically are. So they have to bring it in Texas, they have to bring it in Arizona, wherever they're being kept, not in Washington. They said the injunction is not valid because it should never have been brought there, but they just brought it the same case the next day, but in a different venue where they were. But this is on the substance, what the court said by a 9-0 ruling. Quote, the detainees also sought equitable relief against summary removal, meaning removal with no process. The court went on, although judicial review under the AEA is limited, we have held that an individual subject to detention and removal under that statute is entitled to, quote, judicial review as to both questions of interpretation and constitutionality of the act, meaning whether Trump has the right to invoke it even though we're not at war with a foreign country, as well as whether the person to be removed, quote, is in fact an alien enemy 14 years of age or older, meaning that's what the statute allows. So they can contest either that Trump has no right to invoke the Alien Enemies Act because it's only for wartime. We're not really at war in the sense that the founders meant it and the framers of this law meant it, or they can argue that they're not an alien enemy because they're not part of a Venezuelan drug gang. The court went on. AEA detainees, meaning people in the United States illegally, quote, must receive notice after the date of this order that they are subject to removal under the Alien Enemies Act. The notice must be afforded within a reasonable time and in such a manner as will allow them to actually seek habeas relief in the proper venue before such removal occurs. Here's the Supreme Court saying, yes, they're here illegally. They still have due process rights and the right of habeas corpus before they're punished by being sent to a foreign prison for life. So if you're so radical that you think Justice Thomas and Justice Alito and Justice Gorsuch and the rest are too permissive in their reading of the Constitution, too activist, I would suggest that the extremist is you. Then here is Justice Kavanaugh, who concurred in the opinion that you have to bring it in the place where you're detained, but nonetheless wrote separately to emphasize this, quote, I agree with the court's per curiam opinion. Importantly, as the court stresses, the court's disagreement with the dissenters is not over whether the detainees receive judicial review of their transfers. All 9 members of the court agree that judicial review is available. The only question is where that judicial review should occur. Justice Kavanaugh writing separately to say, the majority recognizes, and I'm emphasizing, that we all agree, all 9 of us, that people in the country illegally to be removed by the AEA have to have sufficient notice to challenge their removal in court by arguing either the act is improperly invoked because we're not at war, or that they are not members of a violent gang. And then here is the 4 judges who dissented on the question of where you have to bring the case. And this is a decision by Sotomayor that Elena Kagan and Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, as well as Amy Coney Barrett, a Trump appointee, joined in parts. And the dissent also said, critically, even the majority today agrees, and the federal government now admits, that individuals subjected to removal under the Alien Enemies Act are entitled to adequate notice and judicial review before they can be removed. Begin that upon which all 9 members of the court agree. The court's order today dictates in no uncertain terms that individuals subject to detention and removal under the Act are entitled to, quote, judicial review. That means, of course, that the government cannot usher any detainees, including plaintiff, onto planes in a shroud of secrecy, as it did on March 15, 2025, nor can the government, quote, immediately resume removing individuals without notice upon vacature of the TRO as a promise the district court it would do. I mean, I don't understand how conservatives who say that the model of a Supreme Court judge is Clarence Thomas, Justice Sam Alito, and Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, all of whom said that due process is entitled, that people in the United States illegally are entitled to this due process and habeas rights, can simultaneously say the Constitution doesn't apply to people in the United States unless you're a citizen. Even if you want to disregard 150 years of jurisprudence that all has said the same by Supreme Courts of every kind. What about this opinion 2 weeks ago that 9-0 ruled against Trump administration and said no due process is required? You can't just sweep people up and put them on a plane to El Salvador and say, oh, sorry, they're already there. There's nothing we can do. Because everybody under the control of the U.S. government has constitutional rights. That is how the Constitution has always been understood, interpreted, and applied.
Justice is announcing a civil lawsuit against the Maine Department of Education. The state of Maine is discriminating against women by failing to protect women in women's sports. Pretty basic stuff.
And if you subscribe to federalism, Maine can do whatever Maine wants to do, no matter how much you don't like what Maine does. Maine is Maine and the sovereign state, according to the Treaty of Paris. But who cares about that anymore? No, the D.C. wants to reign supreme. Remember, D.C. thinks it's in charge of the states. Trump said last week, the states are an entity of the federal government. Wrong. The states have the power. Now, I don't want guys playing in women's sports, nor having it in the bathrooms. But that's the state's right to do that. Remember, North Carolina was pushing against it. They were the only state left saying no guys in the girls' bathroom. Central government went after the state of North Carolina.
This is a violation of Title IX.
Now all of a sudden everyone's okay with Title IX. Title IX used to be like, well, that's why you got rid of this Brown's football. Brown University had to leave the football team because of the girls had to have a volleyball team or whatever the crap it was. Now all of a sudden we want Title IX.
Department of Justice will not sit by when women are discriminated against in sports. This is about sports. This is also about these young women's personal safety. I've met many of these.
Again, Maine problem that people in Maine want to fix. People in Maine can fix it. 0.0 authority for the state, for DC, for the federal government to do anything to the state. Now, do they get rid of federal funding? Great, they should. Shouldn't be anybody having any federal funding. Good, get rid of it. Take it out. Maine's governor should go tell DC to go pound sand.
Women throughout the past weeks and months, and what they have been through.
By the way, hey, Pam, where's the Epstein folder? Hey, how come no lawsuit, no one's being arrested for the Epstein list? Oh, you lying scumbag. By the way, she's an actor.
Is horrific. We have exhausted every other remedy. We tried to get Maine to comply. We don't like standing up here and filing lawsuits. We want to get states to comply with us. That's what
we want to get states to comply with us. No, states do not need to comply with a darn thing that the federal government says.
This is about. We have repeatedly notified Maine of its infractions and urged them to remedy the situation to protect women. We've stripped grants from Maine.
Good.
Through other departments. And we are going to continue to fight for women. Today.
Yeah, I don't want guys, I don't want women, guys and girls, again, don't want the fact of the matter is Bondi has zero right to countersue them on that. They would be glorious. Anything that could be, I would back up this government and say, I don't agree with what you're doing, but I'm for this. By the way, Truth app, Donald J. Trump's app, just banned the 10th Amendment Center the other day. We recently started posting on Truth Social since we like reaching with a message of the Constitution of Liberty wherever they are, whether they're fans of Donald Trump or not. Today we got banned. All we post is links to reports and articles focused on enforcing the Constitution. We never even comment on how bad the Trump administration is in the Constitution. Yet they got banned. The woke right is just like the woke left. There's no difference. You cancel on one side, the other team will cancel the next time. It's the same group, fake two-party system. Speaking of Daniel McAdams goes, American Christians are silent when their fellow Christians are brutalized on Palm Sunday. This is a report. Israel blocks tens of thousands of Palestinian Christians from entering Jerusalem for Palm Sunday. Only 6,000 on the West Banks, 50,000 Christians were allowed to access Jerusalem on Palm Sunday as Israeli forces enforce sweeping military restrictions across the city. Checkpoints surrounded the old city, worshippers had to obtain military permits. The process involves invasive security checks, a digital ID card, and downloading an app run by Israeli authorities. Still, remember a whole thing during the Rona thing? Israel was, quote unquote, a test run country, test state. You don't think Israel has anything to do with this digital ID thing? Most attendees were limited to Jerusalem residents and Palestinian citizens of Israel. Father Ibrahim Faltis said it's the second consecutive year the vast majority of Christians were denied access during Holy Week. Churches canceled all festive events this year in light of Israel's ongoing war with Gaza, limiting observances to prayer. Christians in Gaza still gathered at the Holy Family of St. Bartholomew's churches despite dire conditions. But, it's most favored nation did it, so it's totally okay. So anyways, again, wanted to... If you are this inconsistent, DJT Homer, cult member, it's almost a cult. You can't say anything about Trump. People go, oh, this Stephen just says, doesn't like Trump. Yeah, I'm totally fine. He wants to get rid of the IRS, 100% behind him. Wants to get rid of anything to descale, get rid of the federal government, totally behind him. Sending people away for no due process, just like Lincoln, not a fan of that. What if they did that to you? Imagine you just get that. You says, you're an anti-Semitic. We're throwing you to a federal, in El Salvador. Wouldn't you want some due process? Well, we think you're MS-13. Why? Because I have a jersey with number 13 on it? I'd want some due process. This Real ID thing, again, this is a digital gulag that is getting set up. If you can't see that, just because you have a MAGA hat, you should be able to criticize whoever you voted for, whoever you like, no matter what. That's part of the thing, being able to criticize, not just being a cultist cheerleader. Have some guts, grow a spine. God love you. Have a great Holy Week. And we'll see you guys with the new news from the pew next week.